Hey everyone, welcome to Cyryn Gaming's House Flipper Tutorials, where I show you how I make the structures I use in my builds. Let's get started. Today I'm going to be showing you how I make some of the basic windows. These are not all of the different windows I have ever used, they are just the most basic selection of them. And just a quick reminder, as always with my structure builds, you can do everything I do with my structure builds by using the either mods or the game workshop way easier for probably less money and for less demand on your machine. So just keep that in mind, that you should only do these if it's like a challenge you want to take on. They're fun, but they can be a resource hog. So we're going to start by showing you how I make the short window. And as always, we're going to start with our little foundation to place on. And we're just going to start building our first column. I'm going to go up to 8 like we normally do. And if you are not sure what I'm talking about when I say stuff like we normally do, you might want to check out the last 2 tutorials that I have done, which was structures and then stairs.
A link will be in the corner.
Apparently a link will be in the corner. Okay, so for the structure, or for the window builds, I use the freestanding walls, and I usually for windows end up using one of these 4 up at the top because they end up looking the most window-like. They also work out the easiest with the math for planning, but I've also used these ones and these ones before. I've even used these ones down here from time to time. So you can kind of use anything in here. The water walls don't work as well, and these standing walls with the gravel do not work as well though. So when I am building these, rather than memorizing how tall I need to make one, I usually will buy my window in advance and just kind of put it right next to where I am building, so that I can just, as I build, make it as tall as I need to go. And how tall do you need to go would be the next question. And the thing you want to achieve is you want to be able to slide a brick over the top of the window. So this brick won't go over the top of the window, so I need to go one higher. This one goes over. That's as high as I need my structure to go. Now, if you're doing a roof or flooring, this tile can be optional, but for these tutorials, we're going to keep it at that height. So we're going to go ahead and start the next column. Now, what I do, because I know I don't need all of these bricks in the end, is I actually just move them out like this. And I do this instead of just selling the bricks for 2 reasons. One, it just saves a little bit of money, but also I have found that I personally make a lot of oopsies, I sold the wrong brick when I do the selling the brick option, and I get frustrated and I have to rebuild a column just to put 1 brick back because I accidentally sold it because I got a little too trigger happy. So by doing this thing where I just kind of shuffle the bricks around, I end up saving myself a little bit of heartache at the expense of it taking just a little bit longer for me to complete a build. But it's a payoff, it's a trade-off, and I choose to make it. Make your own decision. It is just as easy to fill in this gap area with bricks and then sell the ones that you don't need as it is for me to do what I have done here, which is shuffling them around. So as you can see, when I got as high as my first column, I just vacated the bricks underneath, and I'm creating an area that we are going to slide that window right into. And typically, depending on your aesthetic and your design choices, you're going to want to pay attention to like which side of your bricks you have facing the window versus which side you have facing out. But that again just depends on the aesthetic you're going for. And right now I am not going for any particular aesthetic, so I'm just letting them be placed however. Alright, so you can now just slide your window right into place. Now, one thing that I like to keep in mind is on these walls, you have these little knobs. If you plan on having this inside area be used as part of your building area, like you're going to fill it with furniture, whatever, you want to consider, do you want those knobs to be inside or facing out? It's something that I like to keep in mind. Generally, I go with whichever one makes it so that it looks like it is attached to a solid wall. But in the case of two solid walls like this, I tend to favor out. I also like to line it up pretty much right along the inner line here, as opposed to right on the edge. I find that just tends to make a more windowed appearance than lining it up on the exact outer edge. Now you can also do things like bring it in halfway if you want. I mean, you can really place it wherever, and then make sure you assemble it. This is super helpful as I've mentioned before, these structure builds take up a lot of resources in your machine. So doing little things like making sure that this is assembled means your computer won't see this as an object for you to pick up and move around. It uses a slightly less resources now to render and display this. So it's just a little tip that I have for this. And that is how you make the short window. Now I'm going to show you how to make the taller window by simply modifying this structure, because it is literally the exact same. The only difference is you use the taller, blanked there for a second, the taller windows. You can also use these windows. If you're going to go with the 2 wide instead of the 1 wide, you need to skip 4 spaces instead of 2. So if you notice, like right here, we have 2 bricks in between the walls. To use one of those bigger windows, you just will use 4 bricks between the walls instead. So we're going to line this up, and just like before, we're going to make our structure so that it goes right over the top of it. Okay, so once you finish making your taller structure, it is the exact same as before. However, I actually have a small recommendation. For whatever reason, I find that these taller windows, when they slide into place just like this on the foundation, there's a semi-noticeable gap that occurs at the top due to the hitboxes on this particular one. Personally, I don't like seeing that gap at the top, and I find that gap is much easier to hide if it's on the bottom. So I come in and I place 1 extra foundation tile just to raise up my window, because I do find it's just so much easier to hide a small gap on the bottom than it is to hide a small gap on the top. So if you stand back, oh, that gap isn't exactly right where I want it, I can either move whatever flooring I'm using, and of course this isn't lining up well, so it's hard right now, but I can either do something like this to hide the gap, or I can just put a piece of furniture in there. But like when you stand back here, it now looks nice and flush with the top, and you can't even really tell that there is a gap there. You just see the flooring. It's me personally, I find that it looks better to do it this way than it does to leave the gap at the top, but it's an aesthetic choice, so you do you. You do whichever one you prefer. Okay, so the next type of window I want to show you is going to be the raised platform window. So for the raised platform, you're actually going to start with a structure that is high as what we just did, but you're going to pull out the bottom 4 bricks. If you're wondering, why the bottom 4? Don't you need those? Shouldn't you just fill them in? You can, but what I am going to be showing you is a way to fill it in that actually uses less bricks without changing its look visually. And by using less bricks, you are also using less of your computer's resources. Super important for these structures. So you're gonna come in here, you're gonna grab the 3-tier garden stair with for whichever design pattern you want. And you're gonna put one in. And you're gonna use the garden stairs to fill in the gap here, up to 4 tall. And normally I would have this spun around so that it was this side facing out, so that when I do this it ends up matching. I just didn't do that because it's a little bit easier and faster on tutorials to not worry about that little thing like that. And if you didn't line it up properly, you might need to come in and adjust things just to make sure that everything lines up. Sometimes it can be easier to move things completely out of the way to adjust them. That's just my opinion on that one. And then move these in. And then you just fill in the remaining few little gaps with the singles that you pulled out. Okay, I still didn't line it up properly, but for now we're going to pretend like I did because I am extremely lazy today and don't want to take the time to fix it. So everyone just pretend like it's perfectly lined up in your own little head for me, please. And then you can also silently laugh at me, haha, the fool who didn't line it up properly. Trust me, I do this all the time on my builds, spending so much time making sure things are lined up. So I will not hate you if you laugh at me for it. Then you come in and you pop your window in the same way that you did on the small and the tall. You're just now got it up on a little platform so it looks more like a window. And this one you can also rise up, which again hides the gap at the top, creating it at the bottom. The choice is yours. All right, so the last window type I want to show you how to make is a window that I personally feel works best if you have it in a place where it's not meant to be seen on both sides, where it is meant to only be on either the outside or inside of something, depending on how you design it. I have it set up as if it would be like the inside wall of a building. The reason I say this is because it just tends to not look as nice, I personally think, from the outside. Now, it wouldn't be hard to make it look nice if you choose the right color items and window and stuff like that, but either way, I'm just giving you the disclaimer of how I normally use it. So this is how we are going to make one of these windows. Now, if you have watched my other tutorials, you know that I have mentioned orientation before of the bricks and how important it can be. And this is another example of why orientation is so super important in making windows. If you noticed, when we did these windows, we kept these bricks going the same direction, and we used the width of a brick to judge our window, not the length. This is because, as I have shown in the past, the width and length of the bricks are not the same. I mean, obviously, that is obvious that one side is longer than the other. But what I actually mean by that is when you have two lined up like so, and you lay, say, something like this, too wide on it, you can see this is the same width. This window is the same as too wide. These are actually considered 50 centimeters wide by the game, 1 meter total. However, one brick like this is larger than that. It looks to me to be, I don't know, maybe, I guess, like 104 centimeters. I don't know. Please do not ask me. I am American. I do not normally deal with centimeters. I should, but I don't. So anyways, this is why orientation can be incredibly important on these structure builds, is for things like windows. Because if you have a gap, like say you have done a wall in which the bricks are on this orientation, and you want to try to add a window between these two bricks, you're going to run into a problem of the window not reaching the edge. So there's a few different ways that I have found to work around this, because sometimes, just depending on the build design, you're gonna have walls that run this way and that don't always use the orientation that is the most convenient for windows. And sometimes you don't always want to be stuck not putting windows in walls just because they are orientated differently than what is convenient. So I have found workarounds for that. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to need to build a frame for your windows, which in essence is just, you know what we're actually going to do? Rather than build a frame, we're just going to use the frame that I already built. I am totally cheating on this. So I'm just going to sell this stuff. Okay, so once you have your frame built, which you do have to build this the same way we built the other frames, where you either sell the bricks after you've placed them or you slide them over. But you should end up with a frame that looks something like this. And what will happen is when you go to put in your windows, you are going to quickly discover that there are a couple problems. So problem one, they will not go all the way up against the wall. That is a quirk of them lining up in the hitboxes when you make windows on this orientation of wall. You have two options. You can either hide the fact that they don't line. Well, you have three options, because you can either hide the fact that it doesn't line up to the wall by putting something in front of it. You can roll with it and say it's a design choice. Or you can do something like putting it behind the wall. If you go with this, it does require a little more advanced planning, and I'm not going to be showing exactly how to make that work in this tutorial. It is something I do plan to cover in the future. So for this one, I'm going to be showing you how I choose to hide it. So the first thing I do is I figure out how many potential windows can I put into this area. So I just come in with the biggest and I lay them out and I fill it. And I try to fill in as many as possible. And there we go. I can't do any more. I've got 3 of the largest windows. So there is still a lot of space here that is just empty. I can do a few things. I can put one thing on this side and leave the rest of the windows pushed together like that. Some items that are good for doing this type of option would be coming in the corridor section. You have these wardrobes. They will reach the ceiling if you choose the high options, as will these high shoe cabinets with panels. So you can come in and put a closet in and say that you now have a window wall with a closet on one end. Nobody else would be any the wiser that your windows don't go all the way to the wall if you do something like that. You can do something like what I originally had, which is the furniture living room shelves. And it's these wooden book stands. Sometimes I like to come in and do them with the arm to just kind of create a room divider. And you can then space out your windows as if you're creating a couple different rooms. And you might have to move back and forth a bit as you finalize where you want things to sit and how you want them to look. What you can do when you do it this way, you can either push your bookshelf back so that the window has to line up with it, or you can have it sit in front of the window. Choice is yours. Again, and it probably will depend on what exactly you are going for in your design. But it's really easy to come in here and add these to create space for your windows to fit without them reaching all the way to the wall. And the plus side for this is, depending on what you're planning on using the structure that you are building this for, this is a great way to create like room divisions if you want, or there's a lot of different options that I've done with this. Some other items I know that will reach the ceiling off the top of my head would be furniture in the bedroom, the wardrobes. The ones that reach the top in here are these Photopea. I apologize for mispronouncing that. That is terrible. Photopea. Sure, we're going to go with Photopea. Wardrobes, those will reach the ceiling, so you can use those. And and then these Vrokins also reach the ceiling and can be used to hide windows. And of course, if you're doing the shorter windows, you can use shorter items to hide any gaps that you might have in your windows. And you can also, even though you have these broken up, you can still add a filler piece of foundation if you want to raise it up a bit visually, something like that, so it looks a little better up at the top. And then last step is just making sure you assemble it. And again, this is just to help your computer have a little bit easier time processing your structure builds. That is how you do windows. Alright, so those were how to make windows, which was the third in my structure tutorial series. I am not sure what I will be covering next, but if you want to have input on what you want to see a tutorial on from me in the future, you can definitely let me know in the comments below. Or if you have any specific questions, anything you're confused on, I can definitely try to help. Just drop me a comment. Otherwise, I hope to see you on the next tutorial. Bye!